Welcome to a special edition of Truth and Truthiness. What's special about this edition is we're up on the Cornell campus, and we're actually not doing political truthiness, we're actually going for truth. We're terribly pleased and honored to have Professor Roald Hoffmann, Nobel laureate in chemistry, with us today to discuss his research in chemistry and his art. It's a pleasure to have you.
I'm glad to be here, Ken.
It's really nice. It's really nice.
Yeah.
What I really wanted to talk to you about first is, you know, you're known to the outer world as a Nobel laureate.
Mm-hmm.
And I actually, you know, I was an undergraduate before you got that prize here, and I knew you were talking to Archie Ammons and various other people back then. I actually double majored in physics and English. My question is, when you got the prize, I know a little bit about how hard it is to do research, but when you got the prize, how did that affect you personally?
Well, the only people on whom the effect is all positive was my mother.
Oh, is that right?
And the university.
Right. Really?
Very different ways. My mother was happy.
She's very pleased. Well, yes.
My stepfather died just 2
too
months
bad.
before. My father had been killed in the war. The university, of course, is very happy about that.
Yeah.
On the other people involved, anywhere from my children to me to my students, the effects are not entirely positive. They are very positive in some ways.
Right, right.
But there are also people, for instance, who would ask me, well, what are you going to do next?
Oh, yeah, right.
And you know, I was lucky enough before then that I could just do what I wanted to do.
What you wanted to. Yeah.
And I didn't have to think about that. And the university supported me, and society did too.
Sure.
And the question of what are you going to do next, maybe I prefer not to think about it. I'd like to do next what I want to do.
You want to do science.
And so that does put a little different side on things. I think some people wanted me for my name rather than for me.
Right.
That's not a good feeling either.
Yeah, but some feedback for all. I actually do know you've managed to stay pretty human in this university environment.
I do. So that's the nice
thing. So you've been able to do that however you've done it, but you've had those pressures.
Yeah, I've remained human. I've done what I've wanted to do, which is writing and to continue the science. I didn't succumb to the number of ways the press offers you of making a fool of yourself by pronouncing on things that you don't know about. I have just kept on trying to function, and the community, everyone has let me do that. It's nice in America.
So let me just ask you this question. The people that know you in the chemistry department, the English department, the people who actually knew you before you got their prize, did they accept that pretty gracefully?
Oh, sure.
So they didn't actually. No, your relationship stayed pretty good.
My friends, people who knew me just well. Everything's fine. There are certain barriers that come up between one and students because students, young people, tend to put you on a pedestal. Which has pluses and minuses. Remember about our priests and our movie stars. When they fall harder.
They fall harder.
But fortunately in America it doesn't matter. If I were teaching freshman chemistry, as I continue doing
you did that a long time.
If I were to go into the library the night before the exam, any barriers that came up between me and the students were overcome by their nervousness about the
taking the test.
So they come and ask me what's going to be on the test.
So what's on the test, right? The Nobel thing is not there. They just want to do their homework.
American students are pretty informal, and that was very fortunate. It would never happen in India or Japan.
Or even Germany is very formal too.
That way it was nice. And the town, I think I've been here 46 years.
I know.
My children grew up here. My daughter was 3 weeks old. My son 2 years old when we came here. And my daughter still lives in Ithaca.
Is that right? How old were you when you got the prize?
I was relatively young. I was 44. Ken.
That is young because it takes a delay, right?
I was young, so I had a lot of life left ahead of me, and I've tried to live it as best as I can.
And you didn't feel the skills you needed to, let's say the people that just wanted you for your name, it wasn't that hard to have the skills to detect those things, to handle that, or manage that, or do whatever you want?
So easy.
Oh, it is. It is.
So easy, by and large. So that's not a problem. Anyway, I've tried to live a normal life.
Well, the other thing that I think is very unusual about you, besides your first-rate chemistry, and I do know that it's just so much work to actually do science, and you did great science. And the fact of the matter is that you were also very interested in the arts. I mean, you not only have written poetry for years, but you've written a number of plays that have been produced. And how did you balance that in this community?
Well, I think one question is where does this source, or what are the origins of this? In my case, it goes back to college, as it does for many people, where I did science, but the world opened up to me. This was at Columbia.
Columbia.
I almost went to Cornell, but I didn't. I went to Columbia, New York City. And courses in the humanities and the arts just really made a tremendous impact on me. A poetry course with Mark Van Doren, and a course in Japanese literature with Donald Keene, a great books course. And maybe I didn't have the courage to go into that field, but they left me with admiration and a commitment and also a desire to do something in it. So eventually I started, I sat in on courses here at Cornell, but also I eventually tried to write some poetry. Started in midlife.
Oh, is that right?
And only at around age 40 or so.
Oh, I didn't know that.
And took me 7 years to get a poem published. And finally I found a community of people. I should have taken a course on a poetry. A course would have given me structure, would have given me craftsmanship. But I didn't. I just tried to write, and I got rejections. It took me 7 years to get a poem published. But eventually I found a group of people, including Archie Ammons, who you mentioned, Phyllis Janowitz and David Burek, and we had a little group that read to each other at the Temple of Zeus in town, and it gave me some of the criticism that I needed on the poetry, so I could get some of it published.
But did you feel at your core you're both a scientist and an artist, so that you felt if I'm going to do poetry that I am going to address science? Did you feel that, or did you really feel...
No.
See, I didn't either. I felt English is English and physics is physics, and yeah, I would like to know the meat, but I didn't ever get it.
I could have followed the route, the more normal route to quote unquote creative writing. In some sense, that's the route Carl Sagan followed. That is, you first do science, then you popularize science.
Popularize it.
Then he wrote a novel. It didn't hurt that he got a $2 million advance on the novel, but. I didn't follow that route. I had the science, I had the poetry. And it's then I filled in the ground. I actually did the poetry before I started writing popular science, which I've done since then. And I've written books and articles and essays about science. The poetry and eventually the plays, they came a little later. And then I filled in a ground of nonfiction, essays, philosophy. I write a lot of things. I would say half my time now is spent writing in one way or another, and the other half is doing science.
Would you read one of your poems for us?
Oh, sure.
I mean, do you have anything, any poems with you, Professor
Yes.
Hoffmann?
Now, some of the poems do have something to do with science and some don't. But yes, I do have some poems.
Well, it's up to you.
I
I mean,
brought
either,
some.
yeah.
I have
You got a bag there.
I
Now,
got a
what is
bag
that?
here.
What do you got in there?
Oh, that's a molecule came out first.
I don't know. It looks
You're-
terribly chemical to me. I don't know if I want to hear the poem.
Well, at least it's not alive.
I mean, it's not going to bite anybody, is what you're saying.
Right. I've got some more molecules. We'll talk about those later. They're lots of fun.
Oh, look at
They're
that.
crawling out
Whoa.
of there.
Yes.
But we also have a couple of poetry books. I don't have my poems memorized like a good Russian poet would have, but I have some.
Yes.
I have altogether 4 books published, two are in press, and people can get them. Let's see, a poem. Are you up to religion?
I actually am. I don't know about the audience, but I'm up for it. We'll see.
No, in religion in a general way.
Okay.
It's called Rewrit.
Rewrit.
And you'll see what's being rewritten in a while. When God made the sun, he lay back on his white sand beach, and reaching out with both pale hands into his space, he shaped there a sphere of hydrogen. God did. Set it alight with his nuclear fire. He felt, God felt, its warmth on his soft hand. And it was good. It was his sun. When God set about next to make the moon, he put his feet on the ice cap of Mars and reached out again, seizing a piece of an old sun, and God threw it like a snowball at his earth. The earth rocked, and so the moon, God's moon, came to be. He felt its reflecting light, and it was good, his moon. When the time came for God to people this blue earth, he stood knee-deep in paddy and sea, and dear God, he didn't make people in his image, but just reached out his now sunburned hand to plant a mitochondrion here, a squid's eye, a seed of rice. Hazard he gave them. Rules, God's time, and soon enough the creatures came, spoke. It was good, the word between God and his people. We can go on.
Yeah.
That's a poem that has a little bit of science in it about the story about how the moon was formed, that maybe something collided with the Earth, a big asteroid, and threw off a piece that became the moon. Maybe something came from Mars. That's actually how astronomers think about it.
You know, it's not all that distance from, you know, I really forget my English, but the shores of England are white and pale or something. It really has that literary and that tone to it.
This zone usually fills up with segregation.
Half of the neurologists there is being very much
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to Cornelia Street University. Tonight the science department is taking over.
It's amazing as you see what human hands and mind combined can do with the materials that the world makes available to us.
Buildings are built out of building blocks. They're components we put together.
What I've done to it as an artist, but what it did for me.
I like this picture of the house part.
I think it's just an interesting mix.
Oh, that's what I'm doing. What I'm doing is that when I have guests in the Department of Physics with seminars, I advertise it.
I think the similarities are that we are the sciences and the arts, that they both are human-made. The poetry allowed me to express things that I couldn't express in my scientific writing, which is very formal, third-person, neutered. It can't express emotions. He was 6, June 1944, 5 Jews walking out of hiding to the Russian lines. The fertile fields sodden in spring rains, no way but through the clay. His uncles are leaning on the women his mother carried him. Take clay, a thing with magic, begs to be understood. Kaolin and feldspar, hydrated aluminous silicates, layer light taking up water, platelets sliding past each other, reversible to a point. This lesson may be of use, but who will do the meaning?
You want to do one more? Would you do one more?
Sure, I'll be glad to do one. I have to think. I haven't thought about what one to do, but here's one from. Let me do one from my last book, the latest ones, published, Soliton. And there is a setting in here of olive trees. So obviously this was not written in Ithaca. It was written in Provence in France. But if we don't watch out, maybe there'll be olive trees in Ithaca too. It's called Enough Already. You walk into the sun-splashed olives, mossy trunks, greener than fresh grass. This doesn't seem to be enough. So you think, even here they grow olives only on warm terraces, and ask, who first found olives had to be cured? This cleverness too does not satisfy. So walking hand in hand into the grove, you say, the world needs us and other lovers to give such life, which would do nicely for most, save those who would leave it for a creator. But then, alone, you look real close, and the black spot on the green bark you reach for sharpens into 1.5 inches of scorpion. You see a red beetle, and by God, it does suffice.
Very nice, very nice. You know, I'd like to actually have one other aspect of your writing, and I read an essay that you wrote on the ethics of research.
Yes.
The ethics of research. And I wondered if you could, one, summarize that for the audience first, and then we could discuss that a little bit. What's the issue there?
Well, I think I'm very interested in ethics. It's been also given to me to face a number of ethical questions in one way or another. I think scientists are no better than other human beings. They are not born with ethics, neither are they born with logic.
Right.
We usually think scientists are logical, but scientists usually find out that they are not born with logic when they get the first reviews on their best paper that they've written. And then all of a sudden they find out that those reviewers, who are other scientists, are supposed to be clever, somehow don't get the basic laws of logic.
Yeah.
Anyway, scientists are not born with ethics. They come to science usually as fully formed, as young people fully formed ethically. But there is something in science, perhaps, which exposes us to ethics all the time. We write papers, we have to give credit to others.
There is a part of it that's seeking the truth, and you actually do give credit to predecessors, but
you do want to
I
give
know
credit.
Exactly what you're talking about. You're human beings, jealousies, all these other things.
Right,
it's
but
not
you
as
do, there is something in the process that keeps you honest. People will reproduce your work, or the possibility of reproducibility has to be there. If it's not reproducible, it's not going to be good science. Science, I would say, is not so much a search for truth as it is a search for reliable knowledge, which is an approach to what truth might be.
An approximation.
Approximation.
A model.
It's knowledge that somebody else can have, so the reproducibility is built into the process. And in our papers, we cite other people's work. We better do that honestly and give credit where it's possible. It's true the world of advertising and hype has penetrated, so people push their things ahead, but if you don't cite others, the reviewers of the papers and also the public at large will see through the hype. And
right, but they are human beings. They can forget. They can wantonly, not remember that somebody else did something similar. I mean, there are human jealousies and aspirations and hopes that penetrate.
Of course they do, but basically we're trying to find out how the world works within us and around us. And it's such great fun.
It is, but what about this issue of, are there certain topics, I mean, we can think about Manhattan Project, atomic bomb, are there certain topics that even though they might be an aspect of nature, that you would say, well, look, what's the point? I mean, well, we might as well focus on something else rather than learn how to kill every man in a nanosecond.
There are other things we shouldn't focus on, I would say, shouldn't work on. For instance, I don't think it's appropriate to work on question of race, whatever that is, and intelligence. That because it really doesn't. First of all, I don't think you can define intelligence very well. Mm-hmm. I don't think you can define race very well. We're all mixed up in some way. But even if you have some median definition of some sort, I think we as a society have decided that there is so much variation, even if there is some basic difference, that we're not going to pay any attention to that at all.
Well, there's emotional intelligence.
And if it's going to be used in any information is going to be misused by people in one way or another, it's better not to have it. I do want to fight with you a little bit about, you mentioned rather easily the Manhattan Project.
Right.
Now, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Manhattan Project, but I will say I wouldn't be here if it weren't for the Red Army.
Yeah.
A source of evil in other ways.
No, there's evil in the world.
So I think the Manhattan Project was absolutely well motivated. There were forces of evil. Those forces what killed my father, Nazis. They killed 3 or 4 grandparents, and the Manhattan Project was made under absolutely honest intentions and worries that the Nazis were building an atomic bomb.
Richard Feynman is one of my heroes and physicists, and he was involved in it. And I agree with you on that, but I think there may be other aspects. I mean, do you say that's true of the hydrogen bomb? There was not a Nazi threat, and
no. But at that time, I think actually you have to go back a little bit in history. In fact, the Soviets got that hydrogen bomb built at about the same time or earlier, and there was, I think, the sort of the balanced deterrent of nuclear bombs did keep possibly a war from breaking out, though we came pretty damn close during the Cuba crisis in those times.
Mutual assured destruction was very effective, but
it seemed to be effective, and eventually, with enough patience, the evils of the Soviet Union sank from view. There were more people killed by Stalin and by Mao than even in World War II.
But I guess I think in this ethics paper you did. I mean, so you think race and intelligence. I think
they shouldn't be worked up.
See, now I agree with you on the Manhattan Project. On the other hand, I actually think cognitive science and neuroscience are making progress. Intelligence is not what we thought it was. Emotional intelligence, it's all these more complicated phenomena. But I think they're actually making some good science along those lines. But I seem to remember in your ethics paper, were those the only things you thought shouldn't be researched, or were there in fact some things that were too horrific that you just didn't see the need to go into it, or not? Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe you don't do that.
I think there are some things that are horrific, but some things that horrific do serve some purpose. I'm not sure. There are so many things I wouldn't want to work on that somebody. I think the kind of experiments that were done in concentration camps about how pressure affects people, you might think that they might save lives in some way, but they were done in such an inhuman way, and I think there are things that shouldn't be done. I think we shouldn't do experiments on monkeys, for instance. I think that some species are too close to us.
Right.
I think the use of experiments to devise better cosmetics on animals just doesn't
suit your fancy.
Doesn't fulfill some basic ideas. I think animals can experience emotions and pain.
Yeah. Well, we're going to have to leave it there. It's been a great pleasure having you on our show. Thank you so much for your truths. Professor Roald Hoffmann, Nobel laureate in chemistry at Cornell University. Thank you so much. Bye now.
The joys and the strife of my old college life. Ah, those days were the best I have known. Then here is a toast we will drink, a good rousing health to Cornell. Let your glasses clink. A good excuse, I think, is a toast to her we all love so well. I'm rejoicing tonight o'er her victories again, though I helped not the triumph to gain. I will shout with my might for carnelian and white.
Ndiqaba isonka, ndiqaba isonka, ndiqaba isonka, ndiqaba isonka.
Thank you.